What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pixelists Podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. As always, we're your hosts. That's Blake. I'm Will. The mirror gets me switched up every time.
Anything. Keep going. We just gotta have a perfect. There's so much writing on the individual intro now.
Yeah. But we're here to talk Critical Role, our B&B D&D. For your listening or reviewing pleasure. And big one to talk about today. Episode
Fantastic.
95. Yeah,
fantastic episode. Very fun episode. Lots to talk about with this episode.
Yep.
I also watched the latest Worlds Beyond. I know you haven't seen that yet, but highly recommend that as well to the listeners. If you haven't started with Worlds Beyond Number, it's a very good show, and that one's gotten pretty good in the most recent episode as well. And then we have our live stream on Friday. So
that's right.
Sorry, I got distracted because I was trying to find the name of this episode before we started, which I just found.
I didn't even think about this. We just very, very briefly talked about it, but I need to check and see when I'm going out of town Friday. So... it may be fine, but yeah, it may be I can't show up, or maybe if we could do it early potentially. But
early might be possible.
I'll keep you posted. I'll find out and I'll keep you posted.
Joy's going out of town with the kids, so I could maybe do earlier Friday. Might be a possibility. We'll keep you guys posted.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted. Best place to keep up to date on that posting would be the Discord, so be sure to join that if you haven't already. We would love to hang out with you guys there. And we will be having our Critical Role watch party, as always, this Thursday, a.k.a. tomorrow night. So come join us for that as well. And, is that anything else to divulge?
I think that is everything, my friend.
All right.
I'm first staff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All of a sudden I had a crisis of wait a second. Well, if you're tuning in to just our recap, you've probably figured out by now that we like to do a little recap and then cut that out as its own separate episode. And then in the description of that video, we put our full thoughts and theories about the latest Critical Role episode. So you can check that out if you're not there already. But otherwise, let's dive into this discussion on episode 95, A Gathering of Needs. Now, if you recall in the previous episode, they had just effectively captured Astrid. Astrid, who was in disguise in Chastity's Nook, I think's the name.
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't know my C2 lore as well as you do. But they interrogate her. They're like, hey, what do you know about what's going on with Ludinus, about the assembly, like what's going on in this town? And Astrid gives some pretty interesting info. She first of all says that the assembly has either people have sort of joined Ludinus or they've gone in hiding. And the reason they've had to gone in hiding is because whenever the solstice occurred, the mages, the Cerberus assembly sort of not necessarily disbanded, but the archmages basically absconded, and that effectively pissed off is there a queen also, or is it just a king?
There's just a king of like the Dwendalian Empire.
So that upset the king of the Dwendalian Empire, and so herself among a few others have basically been in hiding. She supposes that Ludinus is in Iselcross and is specifically at an area in Aor called the Genesis Ward. She says that he has been spending time there for about 5 years now. Also mentions that he has been intrigued, through someone else. Someone else gave her a tidbit of information that while he's been at the Genesis Ward, he's been spending time with something called the Occultist Thalamus. Matt Mercer, how do you come up with these names? The Occultist Thalamus, and that the person who told her this was apparently frightened that they had even let that piece of information the piece of information go to Astrid. As I mentioned, the assembly has pretty much vanished. The war between the Dwendalian Empire and the Kryn dynasty, I think that's right, Will, that there's been like sort of like a makeshift peace over the last 7 years. But Astrid mentions that this has been largely just like a political move, and there's still been sort of like this shadowy war that's been happening behind the scenes between these two empires, or factions, I guess. Also, they ask about the nature of Astrid's place in the assembly, and Astrid mentions that Trent is hopefully still imprisoned, and that she took his place something around 7 years ago, but she's never been treated as an equal. She also shares, they ask, do you have any information we can use to help us against Ludinus? And she says, there is this one thing I noticed about him, a certain itch on the back of his neck. And she describes it as like a moment of vulnerability that when he saw her noticing him scratching this itch, that he shot her like this deathly glare, like this sort of like murderous look, that she actually saw this. She also mentions that while she's been hiding in Zadash, that a monstrous bird of black and purple fire recently attacked the city. It's important to note that Travis Willingham goes nuts around this point, our lore master of the group. And other than that, she also requests, hey, if you'll please, once all this kind of settles down, if you'll just remember that I was helpful. And they're like, okay, sure. And Jenny, by the way, gives her like a little wooden coin or a little wooden ball that reads "Farts are funny" as like a parting gift for her. They leave as they're leaving the store. They stop by the bookshop owner. They do end up buying a few books, but the bookshop owner actually asks them, "Hey, if you ever make your way to the Menagerie Coast, if you can check in on my pen pal, who I haven't heard from in a while, and just make sure that they're okay." And this is Yusa Arenis. These are all these C2 names. But I remember Yusa was in the Two Shot that we watched as well, owns a big tower, and presumably has some pretty significant scenes in Campaign 2 as well. But the shop owner has not heard from Yusa in quite a while and wants to make sure they're okay. They're trying to decide what to do next. Essig basically says, like, hey, once you're kind of done with your shopping, meet me back at this inn. They decide they all want to go, it's a shopping episode or a shopping half. So they're like, what kind of shopping do you want to do? Let's go get some fancy clothes. So they go to this place called the Emerald Curtain. And as they're talking about getting new clothes on, Dorian has this great idea to effectively take the parts of F.C.G. that they've been holding and to try to fashion them and craft them into new outfits to sort of remember F.C.G. and also fill their need of wanting to wear like new attire. They then go to another Campaign 2 favorite, over to the Pinto Market, to the shop The Invulnerable Vagrant, to this magic shop where this Furbolg and their simulacrum shop attendants are present. This is Pumat Soul's shop. Unfortunately, Pumat Soul Prime is not in. He's out gathering materials. But immediately lets the party know that they've actually just reopened after the city was under siege by this phoenix, and shares that this phoenix, basically there was like a mountain to the east that split open and this phoenix roared out. It's been like destroying the countryside for 2 weeks. The Righteous Brand, I think, was the name of like the military that like rose up against it, among many others. And some 3 days ago, it disappeared, and they presume that they were maybe successful. And by the way, there's a lot of other like crazy stuff happening around the town as well, or outside the town. They ask about a variety of items. Ultimately, what they end up buying is a few really cool things. First of all, they get a potion of speed and a potion of limited invulnerability. They get 3 greater healing potions and 2 superior healing potions. But in addition to that, they get 3 magical items. They get the Harp of Valor, which is a magical short bow where effectively you can expend charges to cast a certain like thunder wave. I think it maybe actually is thunder wave. They get the Robe of the Midnight Rune, which allows them, the wearer, to increase their spell save DC by 2 and their spell attack modifier by 2 as well. And they get a Zephyr armor for Aurum, which I think gave him advantage maybe on dexterity checks or saving throws. I'm not sure. All of this cost, by the way, something like I think it was like 18 or 19,000 gold. It cleans out the entire party, but they are able to convince Pumatsol to lower the price down to around 17,000 gold by offering the Viridian glass weapons that they still have with them. They actually end up exchanging one of the daggers and one of the short swords. As they're leaving, Pumatsol is like, yeah, just remember, be really safe. There's that mountain I mentioned that split open. He mentions a crater that like opened up elsewhere, and then also like a countryside where like merfolk have like totally taken over, and is like, yeah, you should be really careful as best you can. The party then heads to the inn where they're going to retire and meet back up with Essek, and then we go to break. So you want to take it from there?
Yeah. So we pick up after the break with the party and Essek basically going to find a place to stay for the night. And they go to a place called the Lodge of the Eclipse, which is very fitting, right? And it's a very kind of hopping little tavern. Excuse me. Essek rents two rooms, one big, one small, basically one for himself privately, and Bell's Hells will share the larger room. But before they turn in for the night, the gang decides to kind of let loose a little bit and enjoy this tavern, which there seems to be a burlesque show happening. So everyone's kind of letting loose a little bit. We have a great conversation between Imogen and Essek where she like apologizes for everybody getting a little bit rowdy and says, "We're normally not like this. It's just been a rough couple weeks. Like we need to blow off some steam." And Essek says, "I totally understand. Like I know how important it is to find those little pockets of joy where you can." And he says, "A wise man once told me that it's not pain that makes people, it's love that makes them," which is a nice little C2 callback. But Imogen responds to that by saying, "Well, a man once told me that it's good to make every day a smiley day." So, really good little moment right there. They continue having their fun, and at some point, I believe Fern and maybe Laudna go up to the room before everybody else, and as they're kind of saying their goodbyes, Ashton pickpockets Fern and is able to get a little bit of like the lace from her robes or dress and rip that off and take it. So a few people go up to their room, but meanwhile, Chetney and Dorian make their way to like the front row of the show. Like they're really having a good time. Um, but eventually the show ends. Everyone ends up going back up to the rooms where Ashton wants Essek to take a look at his head. Um, and so Essek does, and he is fascinated by this. He thinks it's impossible. So his eyes begin to glow as he starts casting some spells. And at one point, he creates like this little bead and like brings it closer to Ashton's head. And Ashton's head reacts and like starts to swirl up like a storm. And again, Essek is just absolutely fascinated by this and is like, "Are you guys familiar with Dunamancy?" And Bell's Hells aren't. So he tells them a little bit about it and how it's a pillar of magic associated with the dynasty and the Luxon. And then he gives kind of the crash course on what the Luxon is, how they believe it was this creator that came to the world and split itself into these artifacts, and these artifacts are very powerful. Basically, that's what Ashton's head is reminding him of. So he says, "Hey, you are remarkable and dangerous, and don't share this information with anyone. Like, trust no one. And I'd really like to study your head after all this craziness is said and done." Um, so after that, Essek takes his leave, and basically everyone kind of has some me time before they're prepping for bed. People are crafting on their new outfit ideas. Chetney's carving some wood. But Orem in particular wants to get Odahan's sword out of the bag of holding. So he does that, and then he takes it outside by himself. Meanwhile, Imogen asks, oh, actually, excuse me, Essek hasn't left yet, because meanwhile, Imogen asks him if Ludinus knows about Dunamancy. And Essek says, "Yeah, Ludinus knows quite a lot, actually, and it's partially my fault due to things I did in the past, which kind of gave the Empire this knowledge on the Luxon and the beacons and Dunamancy. And that's part of why I'm on the run these days." So Essek then makes this illusion to show what a beacon looks like and explains that this is the fragment of the Luxon, and the assembly has at least one and may have others. And they say that the vial that ended up like fixing Ashton way back when probably contained like liquid from a beacon. So the party then talks about how they saw one of these things powering the Malleus key, and that may be what's tethering Ruidus to the planet. So Essex thinks if they could get enough Dunamancers like himself, then perhaps they could disrupt that tether. And then Essex retires for the night. So meanwhile, we cut back to Orem, who again has left by himself to go outside, and he is sitting on a bench and is basically just looking at this sword that has haunted him three separate times throughout his life. And he's just kind of feeling the weight of the blade, which is far heavier than what he's used to. And he just begins to practice, do the same motions he always does with his training. And after a while, he starts to get used to the blade. And then he does it so long that like his arm starts to hurt. And at that point, he places it on his back, and the vines kind of create a sheath around it right next to Seedling. And he decides that, he can hopefully use this for good in a way. And as he's kind of having this moment, it starts to rain, and it's like he's feeling the presence of the Wild Mother. At some point, Fern comes outside to check on him, ask if he's okay. They have a little moment, and then Dorian also joins them, and we have like a big three-way hug, and they kind of reminisce about how this whole journey started with the three of them, with the Crown Keepers, and they're just glad to all be together again. But then Fern kind of awkwardly takes her leave, being like, "I'm going to leave you two alone." And so then Orm and Dorian just have a little moment where Orm says that, I tried to reach out to you so many times, and I wouldn't have been able to get through some of these hard times if I hadn't have had like you to reach out to. And Dorian says that he wouldn't be here without Orm, and he's glad that they're here now back together. And then they kind of, I think, take each other's hands and walk back inside. And everyone does a little bit more of their crafting before retiring for the night, except Laudna, who continues kind of crafting on her own. And after everyone is asleep, she kind of is having these thoughts about Orem taking Odahan's sword, and she just hates it. And Delilah is talking to her and says, it's bad to keep something like that so close to you. And Laudna's like, well, yeah, is the sword evil? Is it going to turn Orem evil? And Delilah says, well, I need to hold it to find out. And so Laudna asks, hey, were you part of the assembly, and did you know Ludinus? And Delilah says, yep, I did. And, Ludinus didn't have many friends. He just used people and then cast them aside. But I'm going to need you to help me in order for me to help you more. Like saying, like, go get me that sword. So Laudna kind of creeps on over to where Orem is. He's sleeping, and she kind of runs her finger over the blade. And she again asks if it's evil. And she says, well, you need to show it to me. So at this point, Laudna casts darkness over the room, making it pitch black. And then she decides to cast Wither and Bloom on Orem, but more specifically on the sheath of vines in order to try to break it so that she can get the sword free. Of course, this causes some kind of collateral damage to Orem himself, which makes him wake up. And he wakes up and just sees this magical darkness and nothing else. So his first instinct is to, of course, kind of react defensively. And he kind of grabs Seedling and just kind of slashes out with it. And I think he actually makes 3 total attacks, and a few of them hit Laudna, one of them even knocking her back into the wall, which causes a noise and wakes up the majority of everybody else in the room, who are also confused because of this magical darkness. So Laudna casts Spider Climb on herself and is like crawling up on the wall, and is now trying to use Mage Hand to rip the sword off of Orem's back. And Delilah is just like egging her on, saying it must be destroyed. So Orem continues making attacks, like thinking he's being assaulted in the middle of the night here. And one of these attacks causes Laudna to fail her concentration save, which makes the magical darkness fade. And so at this point, everyone can see what's going on, like kind of a crazed Laudna, like spider climbing on the wall, and Orem attacking her. And everybody's like, whoa, like what's going on here? And everyone's just freaking out. And Orem, first thing he does is he uses Grasping Vine to try to get the sword back that Laudna had grabbed with the Mage Hand. But Laudna counterspells that. And so Orem rushes up and uses a disarming attack to knock it from her. And then he picks it up off the ground. She, in response to this, tries to cast Phantasmal Force on him, but he saves. And everyone is just like, hey, like, whoa, let's talk about this. What's going on here? So Laudna says that sword isn't safe, and I'm just trying to deal with it. It's done horrible things. Like, why would he want to wield it? And Orym basically, his rebuttal to that is like, you are literally wielding an evil power for like the benefit of the group. And Imogen's like, hey, like maybe let's just take a look at the sword and make sure it's safe. And Orm's like, yeah, I mean, you could have just asked that though. Like, this isn't very convincing to be woken up in the middle of the night being attacked. And then he kind of shows everybody the wound that he got from Wither and Bloom. So at this point, Ashton kind of steps in between Laudna and Orym and kind of whispers to her, like, hey, like maybe you should apologize for hurting him. But, Laudna is kind of just lost in the sauce right now. And Imogen telepathically asks her, hey, like, was this your doing or like what's going on? And Laudna says, yes, it was all my doing. So Fern at this point says, hey, like, I can identify this thing. So how about I take a look at it? And Orym sets it down and it's like, okay. So she identifies it and can tell that the blade has like a dark history, but it doesn't seem to be evil. But that's basically all she knows. So they decide to wake up Chetney and get him to cast his grim psychometry on the blade. And what follows is kind of this long, dark, bloody history of getting visions of just like the countless lives this sword has taken, tons of death. And as soon as the vision ends, Chetney like throws up from just like all of the horrific things that he saw. And he tells them that this thing is death and suffering, but there's no like sentience to it. So the party continues, this very tense back and forth with Laudna arguing that the sword is evil and that Orym is bringing up this is just a weapon. It's a tool. It's no worse than any of the things like you guys are using. And as this is happening, Laudna starts opening the window to the hotel room, but like people keep closing it or like standing between her and it. And Laudna eventually says, just let me take the blade. Like, why do you need it? Like, I can use the power in it without actually having to wield it. And Orym is like, this is all I have. Okay. Like, I am a fighter. I have my sword. I have my hours of practice. Like, I don't have powerful spells like you. Like, let me use this thing. And, Laudna then, like, just tired of talking, mage hands again and tries to just steal the sword from the table, but Imogen grabs it like at the same time and tells Laudna to let go. It's not the sword, but it's who wields it. So like she just needs to let this go. And she says, I don't think you're the one that was really doing this. And so Laudna lets go. And it's still very tense, but Chetney holds up Odahan's dagger out of the bag of holding and offers a compromise, saying, hey, Laudna, maybe you take this, Orym keeps the sword, and everybody can be happy. And Laudna grabs the dagger and then basically spider climb, like flees out of the window. And Imogen just immediately follows her by casting fly. So Laudna like kind of goes up to the roof, immediately casts her form of dread, which is basically just her becoming Delilah, like a shadowy form of Delilah. And she then plunges the dagger into her chest. And these like dark tendrils kind of like sprout out and push it all the way in. And Imogen kind of describes seeing Laudna's face like trapped within Delilah's illusion, like as if she's in a cage. And Imogen just asks her why. And Laudna says it had to be done. Like, what else do I have to give but myself? And Laudna asks if Imogen still loves her. And Imogen says, like, I'll always love you, but I don't know what to do with that right now. And after this kind of initial moment subsides, Laudna kind of like comes more to and says, like, I didn't mean it. And she goes in to hug Imogen, and that's where the episode ends. Once again, that was episode 95. I don't remember the title.
Gathering of Needs.
Gathering of Needs. So if you're just on our recap and want to hear our full discussion, be sure to click that link down in the description.
Man, that was such a hard final scene.
Yeah, bro. Such a tense second half.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack from the second half, but hats off to Marisha Ray and Laura Bailey. That those final moments, I think Laura acted so well, this feeling of loving someone who is an addict almost,
Yeah.
and like being exposed to their brokenness and like knowing you can't do anything about it.
Right.
It reminded me of the Steve Carell movie, The Beautiful Boy, I think it's what it's called. If you ever saw that,
I don't know if I
it's
did.
actually with Timothy Oliphant. Not Timothy Oliphant. That's a sorry. Hang on, the guy from Dune.
Yeah. Chalamet.
Why did I say Timothy Oliphant? He plays a baby. First of all, it's a very serious film. um. Anyway,
No, I haven't. I know the movie you're talking about, but I haven't seen that
yeah.
one.
So not getting into it, but his son is a drug addict, and there's some really hard scenes. Um, but yeah, this was just really hard to watch. It was really hard to see Laudna so addicted and broken, I guess. I mean, I guess maybe it's a matter of perspective. I mean, I guess she's more powerful than she's ever been, but um I just think the look of disappointment on Imogen's face was just so palpable.
Yeah, totally. I thought it was brilliant from Laudna or Marisha, excuse me. But yeah, also Laura and Liam. Like that, just whole dynamic was so good. And did you get a
Liam
chance?
was
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I say Liam was incredible.
Yeah. Um,
So
as always, did you get a chance to watch the cooldown?
no, because I don't have Beacon yet.
Yeah, um, I was just asking because Marisha even explicitly brought that up that like this was addiction, like that she was kind of role playing
Okay.
there.
Okay, I didn't know if that was too harsh of a word for me to use, but
No,
she role played it very well. I mean,
yeah,
very much. That was the whole vibe I got watching it. Was like, this is an addict who needs their next fix. I didn't know if I was interrupting you, by the way, what
no,
you
I
were
just wanted
saying.
to because I didn't think you had seen the cooldown. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to share that your insight there was
Dude,
correct.
Marisha Ray, man. Dude, this campaign is getting really freaking good.
Yeah,
Um, I just, golly, man. It's just, we've been talking in the Discord today. I don't know if you saw any of our chatter,
I haven't
but
yet.
for those listening, if you're not in our Discord, you got to jump in because we've been having a really great discussion today on where does this campaign go, and not so much in the short term, but like, is this campaign going to have a happy ending? Because you almost wonder, like Laudna specifically, Laudna is addicted and somewhat like endlessly manipulated by Delilah, who we know, and you can correct me, this is just my perception, canonically a pretty evil character. So like, I don't
Not
think
the
Delilah's
best.
like, yeah, not the best character. So like, intentions for Laudna, who, by the way, if anyone's forgotten, are you okay? By the way, in case anyone's forgotten, Delilah tortured and murdered Laudna
Right,
originally.
right.
You know, so that and then to raise her as her like sort of like physical embodiment is already such a um disgusting tragedy against Laudna.
Yeah,
But so point being, like, you see Laudna as she is in this episode, and you almost wonder, like, we would need like a 20 episode arc to like go on an adventure to like heal her and like free her of Delilah and like be rid of this whole thing. But there's no time for that. You know, there's at least it doesn't seem like there's time for it right now. And so the discussion we were having was like, is there going to be a happy ending to this campaign? And and by the way, it's not just Laudna. Everyone has like stuff that they're dealing with. So, um, and for people who like this kind of discussion, you know, jump into the Discord. We talked a lot about like, you know, stereotypical like heroes and the hero's journey and like things like that. But a lot of good chatter in there to check out. But anyway, what are you thinking as we're talking about this?
yeah. I mean, I agree. They all have their demons, and especially Laudna right now. I I think I think that will get addressed before the campaign ends. Now, that's not to say it will be like this 20 episode side quest necessarily, but I think that has to come to a boiling point where like Delilah fully takes over and like Laudna is stripped of all of her agency. And, I just feel like there has to be some moment like that that's coming that will then be forcibly faced upon everybody to deal with. Now, that may not have a happy conclusion, but I do think like that will happen. Like I don't think the campaign will end with us just kind of having to wonder about like this really tragic thing still going on with Laudna. Um,
Yeah,
or
and
like
I
I could see Laudna dying, which would be equally tragic, and in that way it could remain unresolved. But otherwise, I do think we'll get some sort of interaction with that.
but I mean, and someone mentioned this in the Discord. And let me actually just pull it up just so I can credit the person. Oh man. Oh, Barbara mentioned it'd be cool if we had like kind of like a Rogue One style ending. Which spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Rogue One, but like could this campaign end on the moon with like them basically sacrificing themselves to save the world? And in a way, I mean, Laudna at least gets to rest, And I think when I
Yeah.
say like a tragic ending, I don't think I necessarily mean like, oh, and then there's Laudna still like semi-possessed. I just mean like, I just don't see an end scenario where like Orem and Dorian, like, let's go retire, and Zephyra, and like Laudna and Imogen, like, let's go run away together, and like everyone's happy, and Chetney finds his family again, and like, I don't know. I feel like, and I think that's a little bit of like the beauty and tragedy of the story is here you have a group of sort of non-stereotypical heroes who are sort of sacrificing themselves to just kind of press on and do what they think's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I I agree with that assessment, and I think that in campaign 3 it's definitely dialed up like to an 11, where like that seems to be a factor with the majority of the party, like kind of this, I don't know a nice word to catch all for everybody, but tragic, I guess. Um, but I will say that that's existed in all the campaigns, just maybe not
Mm.
as much. Like I would definitely say there are similar characters, and we won't get into spoilers, obviously, but in
Yeah. Okay.
C1 and C2 that I could have had the same conversation about. But what I'll say is I don't expect there to be like the happily ever after ending. But I would say that none of the campaigns have really had that. Sure, like there you kind of end on like a nice little epilogue note, but as we know, the world keeps spinning, and
Mm-hmm.
um, so I do think that like I guess what I'm saying is I agree that it's not going to be happily ever after, but I do think there is a light at the end of the tunnel for some of the characters potentially, like insofar as Orum's a little bit different given the deal he made with Nanamori. We don't really know what's going to manifest out with that. But let's just take Laudna and Imogen, for example. If they are able to come out the other side of this, then I could see the happily ever after insofar as like, let's just go retire and like just live for each other, until the next big campaign 4 cameo shows up where they got to be drugged back in type of thing. So not to say that they would never have any problems, and maybe the Delilah thing would still be around, but I guess I think there's still room for like not just a purely tragic ending, in those ways, but I do think this campaign in particular has had that the most, um,
Mhm.
where I could see a Rogue One type ending, but if so, I wouldn't think it was planned. But I just could see
No,
that I could see that happening.
no, yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you though. It feels like this Laudna thing has to come to a head. Like we've been saying
Yeah,
this for like 30 episodes. Like,
yeah,
hey, are we gonna talk about Laudna? And it
yeah,
feels, and it's kind of it's a little weird. And I guess this is also like how it is with addicts in general. Like everyone's very aware, but like no one's really been bold enough to like address it, I guess. I mean, if we remember, like Laudna wanted to kill Ashton.
yeah,
Like heat of the moment, sure, but like from her own mouth, like wanted to kill Ashton. Um, just a very much breaking at the seams. And so I'm kind of like, I wonder if it's going to be Dorian, who's like a little bit less familiar with the group, who's kind of like,
yeah.
hey, it's cool, everybody. By the way, you seem like you're having some real issues. Like, have y'all talked about
Yeah,
that?
like what did I
Uh,
miss here?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like not addressing it's weirder than addressing it, because now they've had this attack on Orem for the blade, which feels like, I don't know. It just feels like it's very interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it. I feel like it will get addressed at least in conversation form after last night, because we didn't really get to see, like, we saw Imogen's kind of immediate reaction, but like I think there's still space in this next episode or whenever for like everybody else to be like, hey, like we need to talk about Laudna. Um, so I could see like that still happening, but ultimately I think it is like I don't think they're going to be able to do anything until it reaches its boiling point. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, when and what that is going to be a really interesting question because they got enough problems on their plate. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can't. I would find it hard to believe if this was just kind of like a nobody brought it up again, like after the events of last night. Um, but
Yeah.
I don't think Laudna's in a position to, in a very much addict mindset, like is not going to accept or want help at this point. It's going to take like reaching that rock bottom. So I don't expect this to get solved, but I do expect it to get addressed.
Yeah.
And I haven't,
Um,
I intentionally didn't look at Reddit or anything because I just didn't want that. But I was worried, and maybe nobody did. Like maybe the community is going to surprise me here. But I was worried for just the toxic comments that were going to come Marisha's way from people that like weren't able to separate like the actors' choices there. So I don't know if that type of discourse has been happening, but just
I
in
don't
general,
know.
shout out to Marisha for being fantastic and having really cool
Yeah.
choices.
Yeah, Marisha was amazing. I haven't read anything, so I have no idea. But um, this is what makes compelling D&D. Like these are some of the best moments. So I will say in the past, it's been interesting to see not players, viewers be unable to separate players' choices with characters, notably the Ashton and the Shard. But anyway, yeah, I thought it was an amazing episode. I think actually you told me this is one of your favorites,
Yeah,
and having seen it, I would totally agree.
yeah,
Definitely one of my favorites from the campaign. Just an amazing second half. The whole episode was awesome,
yeah.
but
I really
especially
enjoyed
the
the
second half.
shopping half as well.
Yeah,
But
which
yeah, then the inner party. I mean, I guess
yeah,
it technically was PvP, but not that I would necessarily call it that. But that's just always so juicy. So I
yeah.
thought it was funny. It because they it made me think of you because I remember during EXU you really loving that moment where it kind of became a standoff between Orem and Dorian.
And I got
Eh,
brought up. Yeah,
Yeah, and that moment got brought up, and then we kind of had a moment like that. So I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy."
I
But
think
yeah,
as a DM, I just think those are the most fascinating moments, like where players are willing to like lean into their character's motives, and especially when it's like in opposition of someone else at the table, and not in a. You have to have like the right kind of people at the table, like 'cause you don't want someone who's just doing it to be obnoxious,
yeah,
where everyone's like, "Can we just kick them out of the group, maybe?" Or,
yeah,
but yeah, and I love that that moment came up again, which for our viewers who maybe didn't watch EXU, Abria mentioned this 2 episodes ago, or maybe last episode, of the Spider Queen basically saying to Dorian, like, I wanted it to be you. In EXU, before anyone chose to put on the crown, Dorian was being tempted by the crown and actually took the backpack it was being held in, which I think was Orem's backpack, maybe, with the intention of putting it on, or at least holding the backpack. And Orem confronted and like put a blade towards him to be like, put it down or else, which Dorian did. So anyway,
yeah. Fantastic moment, and I love this. I loved everybody's choices, really. Ashton's in particular, I really liked, just given kind of how Ashton previously was the person kind of in the middle of everything, and now that they were the one playing peacemaker. I just liked that, and Chetney kind of just pushing the red button a little bit by like, here's a dagger, we can all be happy. Um, yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes.
It's a bit ironic that Chetney's attempt to like placate Laudna is, I mean, only fed her addiction more. I mean, it's like it diffuses the situation, but it doesn't resolve what the problem was. But
Right.
which is nothing against Travis. It's just an interesting, I think it's how ill-equipped this party is in the moment to like really know how to approach this situation.
Yeah, it felt like a real reaction to me, like
Mhm.
of like a
Yeah,
group of friends that were really dealing with that, being like, "Hey, like let's compromise here. Like, there's another one. How about you take this
yeah,
one? You guys go play with your
yeah,
toys." Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. I feel like, do you think she'll still make a move for the sword too?
I think in the short term she's placated.
Yeah,
I think. Um, but the party should keep in mind that any item they get, she is likely interested in. Um,
yeah,
the trust is broken. They need another trust building exercise with
yeah. Can
F.C.G.
we go back to the Feywild?
So
Nanamori.
um,
Yeah, it
it's
would have been
also
great to see F.C.G in that situation.
well, and it's also kind of interesting. Like you kind of wonder, like, what did they really learn from that? Which is, by the way, like most team building events, you leave feeling a lot better, but you don't actually solve most of what the actual problems are.
Yeah.
So that was realistic. Um, but I love the scene with Orem practicing with the blade
Yes.
outside. That was really cool too.
That was so good. Yeah, I just love those like moments of like intentionality from him, because that's like he's done that several times. Just little training, quiet moments.
Yeah,
Which not that's just I don't know what I would call that necessarily, but I think that's just what makes Liam such a cool player. Just because like I would say most people wouldn't do something like that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna use that sword, and it's got all this like kind of crazy connections to your backstory, but like he takes that moment and goes and like lets it bloom by having that little RP moment, like thinking about the consequences and like what this means to him. Just he's so thoughtful about things like that, and just the
I think
cool like sheath from the
yeah.
seedling and stuff. It was all just such cool imagery.
Speaking of like character development with Ladna, I mean with Orem, he talks about like his obsession isn't the right word. His insistence on keeping the blade is killing lewdness with it. Like that's how he intends to use it.
Yeah,
So
I thought that was interesting.
yeah, a little bit of a revenge spin, I guess.
Because
Um,
I don't know enough about fighters and stuff, but I didn't know if he could like dual wield. But once he said that, I didn't know if the implication was just like he's only going to use seedling until the lewdness fight, then he'll use that, but he'll only ever be using one.
he can use them. He can use them both.
So he can like dual
Any
wield.
yeah, any character can 2-weapon fight. Which he has a rapier. What is seedling? A short sword?
I think so.
Yeah, and I think Ishta, is that what it's called?
I think
Is
so. Yeah, the
is a
summit blade or
rapier,
whatever.
I think. So yeah, he can wield both of them. He can't wield the shield, which is interesting. But yeah, he can use both of them.
Do you think he will,
Um,
since he made that statement, or do you think he'll just be sword and boarding and just swap the
I think
sword?
if he did, it'd be an interesting subtle development of his character. Who Orem's always been like this defender and like caring for everyone else, and like the transition to the two swords would be, um, it would just be an interesting shift for his character.
Yeah,
So
agreed. I'm curious to see what that did they. I know Fern identified it, which did they reveal what it actually did though? Like to
I
us?
don't know. I don't know. Let's see. No, we don't know yet.
I'm curious. But yeah, I'm excited to see him wield that thing. I'm glad that he didn't get talked out of it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
liked
they
that
said,
he defended himself.
yeah, and they said from the get go, like it's his to decide what he does with it. Um, we wondered, would it be, eaten by the vest or would it be used?
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of a vest, if we can change topics, do you have more to say on this?
No, we're good. We're good to move.
So, a seemingly correct Pixelist prediction from Astrid that Ludinus seems to have the harness 2.0
Yeah.
part of his body now, like some kind of bioengineering or something, but has an itch around his neck, which I think is a pretty strong signal that he does have some second version of this harness. And to me, the implication there is, going by Astrid's words, that he uses things and sets them, casts them aside. For me, it's a harder confirmation that Ludinus has no intention for this vessel to be the vessel, but rather that he will consume it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that yeah, I mean, I think that just makes sense. It would have been cool, I guess. I mean, not even cool. I don't think it would have been better or worse, but if he was like truly benevolent or, with his goals, but yeah, I think he definitely plans on zapping up the vessel just the same way Zathuda apparently does with whatever his plans are with wanting it to be Fern. Um so yeah, I'm very curious what he's doing right now though. We know the cuz he's in AR in the Genesis ward.
Which did this? There were so many campaign 2 remarks that I was
Yeah.
just like, everyone in the Discord chat was like, "What?" And I was just like, "Cool." I don't know what that is.
I'm just happy to be
Like,
here.
like
Uh,
Travis going nuts over the bird. I was like,
yeah. We need to talk about that too.
yeah. But anyway, so is the Genesis Ward, is that in campaign 2?
Yes. I
Okay.
think I don't remember when it would have been, but I think we even maybe briefly talked about it during one episode. But it's in one of the ruins of Aor. Um, and it's basically this like laboratory where they were doing experiments. Oh, I think we maybe talked about it back when we were talking about how they were doing experiments in on Ruidus that Eva Roa, was in like the test tube. Um,
Mm.
so the
I know we
Genesis,
talked about it. You talked about it like sourcing the Factorum Malleus. Was that from the Genesis Ward?
I don't,
Or okay.
I don't remember, so don't quote me on it. But I don't think the Factorum Malleus was part of the Genesis
Oh,
Ward.
okay.
Um,
Okay.
this was
I
more for
gotcha.
like crazy experiments and like
Oh, okay.
insane like creatures that they were creating, like chimera esque, like weird combinations, just like mad scientist type stuff in the Genesis Ward. Um, maybe we were talking about it with the Dominox, like maybe it was from the
Yeah.
Genesis Ward.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, so the fact that he's going there, I don't know. Like, is there something specific he wants there? We still don't really know what the devices, the technology that they were harvesting and repurposing was. Um, yeah, it's all end of campaign 2 stuff, which I'm curious if there's any deeper connection beyond just the obvious stuff with Aor and the gods. Like, if there's any connection to the end of campaign 2 stuff,
Mm.
I don't think there is. But yeah, I'm curious
Interesting.
for those of you that have seen C2, if you know what I'm getting at, if you think there's anything there with like the big bads there. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, because we still don't really know. Like, they're trying to get through the glass. Like, that's as much as we know, really. Like, that's what Eva Roa was tasked with, like, to get through this glass. So I guess they still need more in that regard, or there's some other thing that Ludinus is up to that we don't really understand yet.
Mm. Yeah, and the occultist thalamus, is that from campaign 2?
No, that is a new term, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
Which, I'm curious, like the thalamus in the brain, right? Like, wonder if
Yeah.
there's, I'm sure there's intention for Matt choosing that name. So I'm curious, like what he's obsessed with that for.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean, we could get some pretty interesting Age of Arcanum lore in the next batch of episodes, which it seems to be that's where they're heading next, is going to Aor and
Yeah.
figuring out what Ludinus is doing in the Genesis Ward. Interesting other details about the assembly has like vanished, or the archmages have.
Yeah.
But we also know Ludinus met with the king, though,
Right.
right? Or was
Yeah.
seen meeting with the king.
Previously, you mean? Or was there mention of that this episode too?
No, previously.
Yeah, he
Right.
was. So I'm assuming that was kind of before the fallout, if we can call it that.
Yeah, okay.
Because now is the implication that basically the all of the Cerberus assembly is kind of dissolved and on the run sort of now?
Seems like it.
Because I can't remember, it was a couple episodes back, or Eva Roa dropped like a name that was like the assembly defectors or something like that. You remember what I'm talking about?
Okay. Yeah, vaguely.
So I'm wondering if that's like literally members of the Cerberus assembly that like decided they were on Team Ludinus and are working with them, because there's only, I now don't quote me on this, there's either only like 7 or 12 members of the assembly, so like not that
Eight,
many people.
8 members total.
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
uh, not that you can't even give a name to 5 people, but like again, the assembly defactors, which that wasn't it, but I just wondering if that would be like a larger group of people that's being referenced there, like maybe they're underlings and like other people, or are we literally talking about like the head honchos? This isn't really like an important distinction, I'm just curious.
Well, Astrid mentioned in this episode that of the 8, so Ludinus left, she went into hiding, a few others went into hiding of the 8, and that the others were always with Ludinus from the get-go and have joined Ludinus. How many like that split is?
Yeah,
Who knows?
okay,
But
that would make sense then, that so maybe she was referencing that subsection of them.
yeah.
I'm curious which ones are which.
Yeah.
And I think we talked at length about like Astrid and kind of where she stands. It seems
Yeah.
as if she's in a very similar place to what we were talking about, where like she's basically an ally, but she's a tenuous ally, I guess. At least she's not with the bad guy.
Right.
Now, does that mean she's with us? Maybe not. But yeah, just on the run, because I guess the king and the powers that be are hunting down all of them, kind of regardless.
Which is the king a good dude or a not good dude?
I mean, he's a good guy, I guess, but it's not like,
So
I would
much
say
confidence when someone describes you in that way.
I
He's a
just mean
good
like he
guy.
hasn't gotten that much character development, but just like
Yeah,
in
okay.
general, like if you
Yeah, okay.
like, it's not like a typical like fairy tale where like the good king, like I'm sure he has his own corruptions.
Yeah.
But he hasn't ever been like overtly evil or anything.
Yeah. Speaking of Ludinus's plan, we know Keyleth mentioned that it's been hard, for lack of a better phrase, hard to gather heroes or champions because of all the chaos that's happening across the world. And we got mention of one, this Phoenix, this dark Phoenix that Astrid mentions and Pumat Soul mentions, of black and purple fire. Is this a C2 thing or what is this?
Yes, insofar as we found out about it in C2, but it was never in C2.
Okay.
So Ukatoa from the Mighty Nine reunion.
Yep.
Ukatoa is one of like 3 crazy beasts. This Phoenix is another one of the 3. So these
Isn't Ukatoa like a demigod? Like,
yeah, like these things are no joke. Like these things were all imprisoned, and I guess the solstice released them. But like, so this phoenix, and I don't know if I'm saying this right. Deseret, I believe is how you pronounce it. Um, was like imprisoned beneath a mountain, and like its flames kind of like altered the terrain around that area. Like it was like fiery or whatever. But so they described in this episode that it burst forth from that mountain, like splitting the earth. So yeah, I mean that thing would be no joke to take down. And I feel like they kind of implied they took it down, but I'm not convinced. I think maybe it just left.
I think that's what they were. I think Pumat's soul was incorrectly being like, I think they won. They
Yeah.
left, but like, yeah, no.
So
Ukatoa was a big deal. So this sounds
yeah.
this sounds like another job for the Mighty Nine,
Yeah,
or
like
you
I'm
know,
curious if this could be like another one shot or even like side quest. Like even if it's not the Mighty Nine, like not that I still haven't watched or checked out the Reslayer's take or anything. Not this wouldn't be for them, I'm sure, but I'm just curious if they might like open up the stage for other cool little stories.
is Ukatoa released then?
Yeah, I don't know cuz like he was they were all imprisoned and then Ukatoa got out in the reunion as we saw
Right.
and then they like imprisoned
Right.
him. So I don't know if that like re-imprisonment maybe would have been more solid than the original imprisonments that broke free.
Hmm.
Um, but I at least kind of assumed that the third one also got out. Um, so not Ukatoa, but the other one. What is his name?
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah, because there's three total.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
they all have crazy names. I can't really pronounce that.
Ukatoa Deseret, I think you said.
Deseret and
Okay.
Quajath. That's certainly not how it's pronounced, but it's Quajath. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
which interesting for him, he was in Islecross. So if we're heading up to Aor, could there be
Oh,
any?
dude,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
could there be any stuff like I don't think Bell's Hells is strong enough to deal with something like that, but we may like see some reference to it or repercussions from it or something.
Wow. So, yeah, wow, that's really interesting. It also
Um,
makes me wonder if like the Dominox, not that the Dominox is that third one you mentioned, but if the Dominox is like this powerful entity that was released with the solstice. And,
yeah,
Ludinus mentioned that like, or excuse me, Keyleth mentioned that Ludinus was like using the chaos to like further his own advances, but maybe, didn't expect like, oh, I kind of thought you guys would kind of roam out away from Isocross.
yeah,
So that'd be a powerful creature if it's a demigod for him to have to deal with himself.
yeah, yeah. That would be cool if that's what was going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
But yeah, there's just and we've talked about this before. But I'm just curious, like, what will happen with these huge things? Like, will it just be kind of lore dropped from Matt? Like, oh, Vox Machina, they just got back from dealing with Deseret. Now they're here, because the whole like I need to go gather heroes. Like maybe they're all off working on these things, or could we get like actual one
Hmm.
shots of like I guess they would all have to be kind of flashbacks, but not that there's a problem. Not that that's really an issue. Like,
Yeah, very interesting, to say the least.
yeah, very.
Yeah. Um, has it been 2 weeks since the solstice? It's been more time, right?
Um,
Because like, why was the Phoenix released 2 weeks ago? Or
since
maybe it's
the,
maybe it's been a few weeks.
yeah, I think it's been at least since like the Malleus key moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. It's hard. Um,
because they were separated for
right.
like a week or
At
more,
least it felt like at least.
and then they went to the Shattered Teeth, and then
Right.
they went to Ruidus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it could be a few weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure Danny Carr has that all worked out.
Yeah.
Um,
And maybe
so
even like it took a while to fully get free or something,
yeah.
like if it's been a month, maybe it's still just burst out 2 weeks ago or
Oh,
whatever.
that reminds me though of this kind of thought I had about they asked Essek about, or I think Laudna, excuse me, Imogen asked, is Predathos basically the Luxon?
Mm,
And it did. It's interesting. It would be interesting if that was the case. But separate from that, it makes me wonder the nature of the vessel. It made me wonder if, like, I always envisioned Predathos like in a cocoon, like waiting to break free. But the fact that you need a vessel makes me wonder, like, did the gods like obliterate Predathos and then like imprisoned his essence on the moon? And like it can only like reform as a vessel, or really nothing as insightful to talk about it other than just like the connection I made was if they did like obliterate Predathos into its essence, maybe the Luxon beacons are like the remaining pieces of it or something. If it is true that they are related in some way, which could totally not be.
yeah, it's interesting because we don't all we know is like the dynasty's belief, like their creation myth surrounding the Luxon. So is that true? Like it might not be, it might just be what they
Yeah.
believe. But I would I don't know if I'd say guess because I don't really have evidence, but I would, I guess, be more in line with the idea that they were kind of two sides of the same coin, but not literally the same entity. Um, but I mean, anything's possible. And as far as your question, the way I understand it is that whatever magic they did to imprison Predathos, like transformed it into that like ruidian glass, right? They said that was like its final form that's like spread all throughout the planet or the moon. Um, so now whether like since it literally turned to glass, like does did it revert to like a previous form and it's stuck inside the glass, or is it just its essence that now remains in that glass? But either way, the glass itself seems to be the prison. So my understanding was that the vessel was necessary just to jailbreak. Um, I don't know if it would necessarily continue to need the vessel once it's out, but that's an interesting question.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. So maybe the vessel is like the means of actually getting out
Yeah,
and not like permanent formation, which is what I
right.
thought it was.
It could be, but I don't know.
Okay. Okay. And then the last detail that I was thinking of was, am I saying the name right? Yusa Uranus?
Yusa, yeah,
Uranus?
yeah, Yusa,
Yusa? Um, that's an interesting breadcrumb
yeah.
that,
He's got like a little pin pal.
and that they're missing or they haven't responded recently.
Yeah, strange.
And if I remember in the reunion, this person owned a magical tower that the
Mhm.
party used to teleport to go to a town to fight. I think the town was either about to be attacked by Ukatoa or they were going to attack, trying to get to Ukatoa faster. I can't remember.
Yeah,
Um,
he's like a powerful. I don't know if wizard. Like I don't know if he's literally a wizard, but like a powerful wizard. Lives in a tower. S- Slight spoilers for C2. Nothing crazy. But one thing I think I might be wrong if I'm forgetting something, but he has a device called the Happy Fun Ball.
oh,
Colloquially, are you familiar with that?
yeah. Only the mention of the one shot or the, not the one shot, the
The episode.
bottle episode. Yeah.
So this thing is like it's like a self-contained realm, basically, and there's some massive time dilation associated with it. So like you could be in the Happy Fun Ball for a day and you come out and it's been a month. But I think that could also work in reverse. Like there's settings to it. So my first thought was maybe Yusa is in the Happy Fun Ball for some reason, and so that's why this person is like he hasn't responded in 3 weeks, but like maybe to him he's been in there for like an hour. Um, that would be like the optimistic reason that he hasn't said anything. Yusa has also gotten himself into some trouble back in C2, so maybe
Interesting.
there's something wrong with him, but It'd be cool if he was in the Happy Fun Ball, maybe even trying to help with what's going on, because the person who created the Happy Fun Ball is like a supremely powerful wizard that was not a good guy. And he like wants to get out. But
I got that person confused with Trent Ickathon
yeah.
because that person in campaign 2, the Mighty Nine encountered them and decided to like keep them imprisoned, or is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. So there was like
Okay.
this he basically doesn't have a body anymore, so he wants to like take someone else's. And I'm paraphrasing here because it's also been a really long time, but I think it was kind of one of those like monkey paw situations, like where he's like, yeah, like I'll give you anything you want, but like let me in, basically, type of thing. So I think they wisely did not listen to him and kept him imprisoned, but I don't know if like at that point, I think they maybe like gave whatever he was in to like somebody else, and like who knows where that is now. I don't think he's still like in the Happy Fun Ball, but he might
Yeah. Okay.
be. I just can't
Okay.
remember. But his name is Halas.
Halas. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So it would be, well, oh, okay. Speaking of this, what if he got out with whatever's happening during the solstice? Wherever he is, that would
Oh.
be interesting.
And maybe first stop was Yusa.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. She's got real.
Yeah, that's always been a really like kind of juicy villain in my opinion. So it would be kind of cool if we got to hear something from him.
Man, so much like good opportunity for the story, man. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I wanna visit all of these story points at some point, but I don't know how they would have time. But
Yeah.
what would take them to the Menagerie Coast, though? Is D there?
Oh yeah, I think he is, actually, now that you say that.
So I think D's there, and maybe whatever they get from Aor, maybe it would cause them to need to go to D.
Yeah. Plus that's
Have you
presumably where some of the Mighty Nine might be.
in the Menagerie Coast?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe.
Have you seen this theory, by the way? I don't know if this came from our Discord, if this was Reddit, or if it even was from you, but them going to Aor and Sam's character being F.C.G, like in stasis,
Yeah.
like another robot, and Sam just plays his same character.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about. I thought this was your theory.
Maybe it was my theory. I don't remember.
But no, yeah, I do remember that.
This does remind
That's a
me.
whole other thing. Like, when is Sam coming back?
That does remind me of a time I was telling Joy, my wife, about something she told me. She was like, "You told me that," and I was like, "Did I? I don't know." Yeah. When is Sam? We know Sam's coming back by episode. Is it 98? Is the live show?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah,
So we got one tomorrow.
Which
and
is
then
96.
That's right. And then when is the live show? Isn't it June?
It's the middle of next month.
Okay, yeah. So take next week off, and then yeah. But and we know Sam's present at that event. So
yeah, it'd be crazy if that's when he comes back, but I feel like he'll come back before that, but I don't know.
I'm also like, who's Brendan gonna play? Or
Yeah, he's
gonna
got to
do?
be. He's got to be having a guest spot, right?
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Matt made a comment like saying, promoting the tickets or whatever, saying like this one's gonna be really like fun and crazy with how things are lining up. So,
oh man,
interested with that means.
Now you gotta buy us tickets. So
Right.
You know
how much a plane ticket is. Bro, if it was just the tickets, I would 100% go. But the fact that you have to build a trip to LA as part of it is the
and LA is
part.
a pretty cheap city to visit.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What?
My sister-in-law lives in LA.
Oh, she
Jessie.
does?
It's coming together. Oh yeah. Your skin's all messed up. I don't think she's actually in LA. I think she's around LA. But in hindsight, that maybe could have been an option. So I don't know. Doesn't help with like the $1,000 plane ticket, but
yeah.
Pumat Soul Shop So they got the clothing to remember F.C.G by, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to see all the new artwork, I presume, that's coming with all like the pieces of his armor. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah. It's definite confirmation that F.C.G is not coming back. And then a few cool items, the Zephyr armor, the harp, and then the robe, I think, is the most powerful item of the three. The spell save DC being increased by 2, and the, I think, spell attack modifier +2. Those are both extremely powerful modifiers. So
that was a really cool item. All the items were cool. I'm excited to see them in action.
Yeah. Other than that, anything else from the episode that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I'm just quickly scanning my notes here. But no, I don't think so.
Well, let us know what y'all thought about the episode. We have our watch party tomorrow night in the Discord. If you want to watch it with us, chat with us. Anybody's welcome, no matter how much you've seen or of the campaign or haven't seen. Everyone's welcome. And then maybe the stream Friday, maybe earlier. We'll just see. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. Well, alrighty. I'm excited.
Alrighty,
y'all. We'll see you in the next one.
Jazz hands. Goodbye.